Hey guys. Tonight's story starts with a confused sheep, a missing shoe, and a very angry old woman accusing you of witchcraft because you said the word battery. You've just woken up in a village where no one knows what a toothbrush is, everyone smells like smoked meat, and you're expected to know how to build a fire using only shame and eye contact. No one's heard of Wi-Fi, but they have heard of plagues. And the mayor? He's 12, and he carries a sword. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake up to the sensation of something damp and suspiciously alive wriggling near your ear. You slap it on instinct, then immediately recoil because it's squishy and warm and possibly someone's pet. Your eyes open. The ceiling above you is thatched, crooked, and one sneeze away from collapsing entirely. A single shaft of light slices through a gap and lands on your nose with what feels like judgment. Around you, the air smells like smoke, sweat, and something that might have once been cheese but has since evolved into a more powerful entity. You sit up too fast and nearly knock yourself out on a hanging bundle of dried herbs that smells like disappointment and onions. Your bed, or more accurately, your pile of straw and broken dreams, creaks under your weight, and something rustles in it. You decide to ignore that forever. Before you can stand, the door creaks open. It doesn't creak like a normal door. It wheezes, groans, and makes a final sound like it's dying dramatically in an opera. A woman steps in. She has one eyebrow, zero patience, and arms like overcooked ham left in the sun. She tosses a turnip at you. Up, stable boy. You're already late. You catch the turnip entirely by accident and stare at it like it might explain something. Stable boy? Late? You look down. Your clothes are definitely not your clothes. They're rough, brown, itchy, and smell like wet burlap got into a fight with mold and lost. There are boots by your bed. One of them contains a mouse. I think there's been a misunderstanding. You start, but she's already gone. You stumble out of bed, jam your feet into the boots, mouse be damned, and shuffle outside like a confused sandwich. The light stabs your eyes, and you blink at a world that is offensively pastoral. Rolling green fields, bleeding sheep, a pig that looks like it's seen war. A small boy runs past you yelling, "Turnip boy's awake," and you have approximately 1 second to realize he's talking about you before 3 more children sprint past and one of them slaps your arm like it's a game. You turn to protest, only to come face to face with a man holding a pitchfork and the air of someone who lost an argument with a mule and is still bitter about it. "You're the new one, eh?" he says, squinting. "You don't look strong, but you've got elbows. That'll do." He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't ask your name. He just shoves a wooden bucket into your hands and points toward a barn that looks like it's being held together by spite and moss. "You're milking Gertrude today. Don't let her sense fear." Before you can ask who or what Gertrude is, he's gone too, whistling a tune that sounds suspiciously like passive-aggressive disapproval. The barn looms in the distance like a sad loaf of bread. You make your way toward it, bucket swinging in one hand, turnip still in the other because honestly, you're not sure if you're supposed to eat it, trade it, or use it as currency. The villagers watch you, not overtly, not enough to be polite about it, but the kind of sideways glances that say, "We've seen your type before, and we don't trust your knees." An old woman near a cart full of cabbage whispers something to her equally old companion. They both cackle like witches in a bedtime story, and one of them spits, on the ground for emphasis. At some point, someone pats your back and says, "You'll last longer than the last one." You do not find this comforting. When you finally reach the barn, it sighs under its own weight. The door groans open, revealing hay, shadows, and an unmistakable bovine presence. Gertrude, large, spotted, and chewing slowly like she's pondering the fall of empires. She turns her head and stares directly into your soul. You stare back. The turnip slips from your hand and hits the floor with a soft, tragic thunk. And that's the moment you realize something deep, something certain, something cold and sharp in the marrow of your bones. You're not going home anytime soon. Someone outside yells, "Get a move on, turnip." That, apparently, is your name now. Welcome to medieval life. You're already behind schedule. You are handed the bucket before you know what it's for, the rake before you know which end is up, and the job title after you've already agreed to it by blinking at the wrong moment. The woman from earlier returns, says something that sounds like "muck curator," and shoves a list into your hand. It's not written down, but it's a list. You can feel the weight of it pressing into your spine. Wake up before the rooster. Feed the things that make noises. Clean the things that make worse noises. And keep your mouth shut about anything that smells alive. Someone mentions you're from Overfield. You nod. You don't know what Overfield is, but it seems safer than explaining you're from a time with shoes made of rubber and a device that tells you the weather and lies to you daily. A hunched man with a nose like a parsnip squints at you while chewing something unchewable. "Didn't think they had people left in Overfield," he mutters. You smile awkwardly and try not to look too modern. You've already folded your sleeves 3 times trying to make them look casual, and now your arms resemble pastry dough stuffed into linen. They assign you to the lower yard. Lower, in this case, does not mean geographically. It means lower in dignity. It's the part of the village where the ground is soft for all the wrong reasons, and the air smells like fermented cabbage and disappointment. You're shown a wooden enclosure, 3 pigs, and a fence that is held together by rope, moss, and what you strongly suspect is prayer. The pigs regard you with the slow, contemplative eyes of creatures who have seen too much and chosen violence. One of them grunts. The others snort in agreement. You assume that means fresh meat. You ask carefully what exactly your task is. A boy named Lute, who is missing both front teeth and possibly the entire concept of boundaries, pats your leg and explains that you are now the assistant muckward Duncan. He says it with reverence. You say thank you, though you are not sure for what. The bucket is for food scraps, he says. The rake is for the other thing. You try not to ask which other thing. It becomes clear. The pigs are named Snort, Blort, and Cynthia. Cynthia is the most aggressive and possibly the leader. She headbutts the bucket the first time you enter the pen, sending a mixture of old turnip, wet crust, and something unidentifiable straight onto your tunic. You wipe it off, immediately regret that decision, and wonder if pig-related injuries qualify for early retirement. Lute applauds. The mud is not all mud. That becomes a theme in your life. Later, a man with a forehead wider than his vocabulary checks on your progress. He nods at the pigs, at the mess, at your now ruined boots. "You'll do," he says. "You've got the look." You don't ask what the look is. You're afraid it's defeated. The villagers continue to assume things about you. A girl near the well asks if you can read clouds, like they do in Overfield. You say yes, then spend 20 minutes staring at the sky and muttering phrases like impending goat, energy, and mild turnip storms. She walks away impressed. You feel like a fraud, but a very cleanly defrauded one. By noon, you've raked things you shouldn't have touched, fed things that bit you anyway, and learned that Cynthia cannot be trusted. Your arms ache in muscles you don't remember earning. Your shirt has fused to your back with something sticky, and every part of your body smells like livestock and shame. Someone hands you a wooden cup of something warm and brown and calls it lunch. It tastes like sadness and mint. You drink all of it. When the sun finally tilts toward afternoon, and the pigs start to nap in a way that suggests you are being tolerated, you sit on a stump and try to remember your real name. Nothing comes. You are the assistant muckward Duncan now, and for reasons you can't explain, you accept this. Cynthia snorts once, deeply, like a toast. You raise your bucket in return. It feels weirdly like victory. The rooster finds you before breakfast. You are carrying a bucket full of something that once aspired to be food but now looks like compost that gave up halfway, and you're halfway across the yard when you feel it. A sudden flutter of wings, a sharp thunk against your shin, and a shrill war cry that sounds less like a bird and more like an ancient warlord with a personal grudge. You look down and there he is, red-combed, beady-eyed, puffed up with purpose. The rooster does not blink. He squares off like a soldier with something to prove and nothing to lose. You take a cautious step back. He takes one forward. The wind shifts slightly, dramatically, as if it, too, wants to watch. You try logic first. "I'm not here to fight you," you say aloud to the rooster. "A mistake." Someone hears. "Then you've already lost," mutters a man stacking firewood nearby, without looking up. The rooster lunges, not gracefully, not even effectively. He flaps wildly and pecks your leg like he's trying to tenderize it. You stumble, drop the bucket, and trip over a suspiciously placed stump. You hit the ground like an overcooked pancake, arms out, dignity gone. He's on you immediately, pecks your sleeve, claws your arm, then leaps off with a triumphant squawk that echoes with a level of pride usually reserved for kings returning from battle. You sit up, bleeding slightly and covered in turnip mush. A small child nearby claps. Someone shouts, "The trial's begun," and this is somehow worse than the bleeding. A crowd gathers. Not a big one, but enough to make your humiliation feel official. You spot the one-eyebrowed woman. She nods like she expected this. A man with a wheezing laugh offers you a wooden spoon for defense. A boy with a tunic, several sizes too big, pushes through the crowd. Eyes wide, arms flailing like he's late to his own story. "That's him," he cries, pointing at the rooster. "That's Sir Cluckles." You don't respond. You assume there's more. "He's a knight," the boy says solemnly, like this explains everything from the last age. He was cursed for hubris or eggs. It's unclear. You blink at him. "Your name?" "Thimble," he says, as if that clears things up. "I've been tracking his moves. He attacked the miller's cat last week, and 2 travelers from Grinwell, and a scarecrow. But that one might have been personal." Sir Cluckles struts in a circle, tail feathers fluffed, eyes narrowed. The crowd hushes. Thimble hands you a stick with something sticky on the end. "It's tradition," he says. "What is?" You ask, but it's too late. Sir Cluckles charges again. You jab the stick vaguely in his direction. It accomplishes nothing. He launches off a bucket, flaps once, and lands on your chest with a thud. You wrestle him off while trying not to scream, because the townspeople are watching and you're fairly certain no one respects a screamer during a poultry duel. Eventually, you manage to roll over, crawl away, and stand bloodied, breathless, and covered in something that smells like onion stew and despair. Sir Cluckles stands too, unbothered, his beak stained with triumph. The crowd erupts. There is clapping. There is cheering. Someone starts a chant that might be your name, or might be turnip, which at this point is basically the same thing. The rooster hops onto a nearby barrel and preens. Thimble approaches and solemnly offers you a small piece of string tied into a knot. "For bravery," he says, "and because he didn't peck your eye out." You take it. Of course you do. Later, as the sun starts to slump in the sky and the pigs begin their usual evening chorus of digestive unrest, you sit on a rock by the fence, sore and sticky and slightly heroic. Sir Cluckles passes you. He pauses, just long enough to make eye contact. It is not affection. It is recognition. The kind that says, "We are not done. You don't know the rules. You don't know why this bird hates you, but you do know one thing. Tomorrow, you're bringing the spoon." You ask if there's a bath because you've reached the point where your own smell is starting to emotionally affect you. You've been chased by poultry, slapped by pigs, and last night you rolled over and heard something in your bed crunch. You don't want to know what it was. You just want water, real water, preferably hot, with soap, maybe some privacy. You think this is a reasonable request. It is not. You say the word bath like someone might say, fresh bread, with hope and reverence. The entire table goes silent. Someone drops a spoon. Old Marta, who you didn't even know could hear, lets out a bark of laughter so abrupt it startles a nearby goat into fainting. Then everyone joins in. The blacksmith howls. The baker wheezes. Even the village priest chuckles into his turnip stew, though he quickly covers it with a cough and a prayer. They laugh for a long time. When it finally dies down, a man with a beard that doubles as a napkin slaps you on the back and says, "We'll show you the bath, newcomer." His tone implies quotation marks. His eyes imply trauma. You are led behind the barn to what can only be described as a barrel of water and lowered standards. The barrel is stained, cracked, and leaning slightly, like even it has doubts about its purpose. There's a thin layer of something on top, dust, leaves, possibly sentient mold, and the water underneath smells faintly of moss, feet, and cold betrayal. "Don't use too much," warns a woman from the well committee, who appears to exist solely to monitor other people's water usage. The well gets finicky. You ask what that means. She doesn't answer. She just makes a vague, warding gesture and disappears into the fog like a folklore character with too much backstory. You remove your tunic. This alone sparks concern. A child watching from the fence gasps and scuttles off like they've just witnessed forbidden magic. You dip a toe into the water and instantly lose all trust in liquids. It's cold. Not just refreshing cold. Existential cold. The kind of cold that makes you reevaluate your choices and question your own birth. You lower yourself in slowly, carefully, trying to preserve what dignity you have left, which at this point could fit in a thimble with room to spare. You begin scrubbing with a rag someone gave you that smells like mint and despair. You do not enjoy this. No one should enjoy this. You're just trying to survive. A voice from behind you says, "You're being a bit theatrical, aren't you?" You turn, startled, and see an elderly man eating a boiled egg while watching you from a nearby stump like this is a scheduled performance. A few more villagers have joined him. Someone passes around what looks like popcorn, except it's roasted peas, and everyone is now discussing your technique like you're auditioning for a soap-based apprenticeship. Apparently, you're showing off. You, who are currently washing with water colder than time and a rag that may or may not have been used to clean a pig's nose last week. You who haven't had a private moment in days. You who are simply trying not to die smelling like boiled goat. They whisper. They snicker. You hear one woman say exhibitionist, like it's both a curse and a compliment. You finish as fast as you can. You dry off with a sackcloth towel that scrapes your skin like it holds a personal grudge. You pull your tunic back on and immediately feel the familiar embrace of residual grime reclaiming your body. The whole bath has accomplished very little beyond bruising your pride and slightly relocating the dirt. That night, you lie awake on your straw pile, itchy, humiliated, and aware that you've been labeled the village's bathing enthusiast. It is not a popular role. Outside your window, an owl hoots once, slowly, like it too has heard what happened. It starts innocently enough. You offer to help in the kitchen because your current chores involve a rake, 3 increasingly aggressive pigs, and a growing sense that Cynthia the pig is plotting something. Baking, you assume, will be cleaner, simpler, less emotionally turbulent. It is not. You're sent to the village oven house, which is a generous title for a stone hut that smells like it's been slowly cooking the same batch of air since the dawn of time. Inside, heat rolls off the walls in waves, and the air is thick with smoke and tension. 6 women, all built like furniture and twice as sturdy, are hunched over a wooden table. They knead dough like it owes them money. You try to introduce yourself, but are shushed instantly, the kind of shush that has generational power behind it. An older woman, older in the way that trees are old, eyes you from across the table. Her name is Mags. That's all you get. Mags points to a sack of flour in the corner and says, Scoop. You ask how much. She says, you'll know. You do not know. You scoop anyway. Your first attempt is apparently wrong. Too heavy. Your second? Too light. The third one you're proud of. But Mags looks at it like you just insulted her goat. You don't know if she even owns a goat, but you feel the offense radiating off her. You're a flower boy now, someone mutters. You think it's a joke. It is not. For the next hour, you stand slightly to the left of the action, scooping flour into bowls and occasionally onto yourself. You try to participate, reaching out to knead a bit of dough that's been abandoned for too long. Mags reacts like you've slapped her favorite nephew. The rolling pin comes flying toward your head with terrifying accuracy. You duck. It hits a sack of onions. No one looks concerned. You don't touch the dough. Mags growls. The dough touches you when it's ready. You don't fully understand what that means, but you nod anyway. You nod so hard your neck clicks. There is no measuring here, no recipe. Everything is done by feel, instinct, and whatever mood the bread gods are in, someone throws salt in from across the room like they're casting a spell. Another woman whispers to the yeast like it's a wounded animal. The dough is slapped, pinched, and twisted into shapes that may or may not be traditional. You aren't allowed to ask. At one point, you're given a brush and told to glaze the loaf. You take this task seriously. You glaze with precision, grace, and what you think is artistic flair. The bread ladies stare. One of them crosses herself. Mags takes the brush away and tells you to go fan the oven fire, which turns out to be a hole in the wall with a personality disorder. The flames shoot up with a roar and a puff of smoke that immediately fills your lungs with regret and possibly rosemary. The final loaves go in. You are told to stand back and not breathe too hard. You do both. By the time the bread emerges, hours later, it is bread adjacent. The outside is blackened. The inside is dense. The texture suggests existential dread. You take a bite. It tastes like someone whispered about wheat in the next room and then punched you in the mouth with soot. Everyone eats it anyway. No one compliments it. This is tradition. Later, you sit outside with black smudges on your face and flour in your hair, watching a child gnaw on a piece like it's a punishment and a snack. Mags passes by, squints at you, and mutters, "Seen worse." You take that as a win, but deep down, you know the yeast knew you were an outsider, and it held a grudge. You just want to sit. That's all. One quiet moment by the well to maybe breathe air that hasn't been filtered through livestock or bread ash or the sour memory of your latest humiliation. You think the stone rim looks inviting, cool, peaceful, safe. It is not. The grandmothers are already there. 5 of them, shawled, squinting, unmoving in that unsettling way. Old statues don't move until you blink. You don't notice them at first because they're so still and tucked into the shadow like part of the scenery, but the moment your backside hits the stone, one of them hums. Not a pleasant hum, not a welcoming hum, a hum that sounds like judgment and dried herbs. "Look who sits like he's earned it," says the one on the far left. Her shawl is knitted from something scratchy and morally superior. Her eyes are the color of tarnished spoons. You try to offer a polite smile, which somehow triggers the others to shift slightly, just enough to form a circle around you. They don't move with their legs. They just appear. A basket is placed next to you. A hand pats your knee without warning. Someone is already brushing imaginary crumbs off your shoulder. You have made a mistake. "Don't speak yet," says the tallest one, who appears to have grown straight out of the bench she's sitting on. "We're still deciding." "About what?" you ask. Wrong question. They lean in perfect synchrony, like a chorus of suspicion. "You're not from here," one whispers. "Your elbows are soft," says another. "You blink like a man with secrets," mutters the third. One of them small, wiry, and probably forged from vinegar and dried apples, pokes your boot with her cane. "From Overfield, are you?" Humph. Overfield boys don't sit that polite. You do not recall the etiquette of Overfield. You do not know what it means to sit impolitely here. You're beginning to suspect it involves more crouching. They don't wait for you to answer. They begin listing what they know. Not what they think, what they know. You eat too quickly. You asked for soap twice. You flinched when the goat sneezed. You said, Tuesday, like someone who's never had to shovel mud out of a chimney. Someone offers you a turnip slice. You take it out of fear. It tastes like root and power imbalance. They tell you about everyone, every scandal, every argument over land, goats, cheese, and someone named Letty who once kissed a man from the next village and brought shame to the crops. You nod. You laugh when they laugh. You gasp when they gasp. It doesn't matter. You are no longer a person. You are an audience. A bird lands nearby. They pause. One of them stares it down until it leaves. You're not sure how. Eventually, they circle back to you. You walk like you don't trust the ground, one observes. He dreams too much. Another murmurs. Could be a nobleman in disguise, the third says with a nod, as if this is a genuine threat to the community. You try to explain you're just new, just confused, just trying to survive pig assignments and poultry warfare and a loaf of bread that threatened to break your molars. But your words are drowned out by a low humming that builds between them like a hive activating. One reaches out and gently pinches your cheek. Not lovingly, scientifically. You'll bear. Watching, she says. And that's it. You've been added to the list, to the schedule, to the unblinking awareness of the village's most potent intelligence network. From now on, every time you sneeze, scratch your head, look at a cloud too long, they will be watching, judging, possibly knitting. As you walk away, you feel it. The hum behind you. The weight of 5 sets of eyes measuring the shape of your back and the suspicion in your gait. You do not run. That would make it worse. But you know the truth now. You sat at the well, and the grandmothers saw your soul. You are told, quite confidently, that milking a cow is simple. Just sit, squeeze, and don't get kicked, says a man with a lopsided hat and a permanent squint. You assume he's joking. He is not. He hands you a stool, a pail, and the kind of grin that suggests something unfortunate is about to happen, but he's not going to stop it. The cow is enormous, not in a cartoonish, comical way. In a biblical way, she has eyes that look through you, not at you, and a posture that implies she's been waiting all morning to teach you a lesson. Her name is Mabel. The stable hand whispers it like you'd whisper the name of a vengeful ghost. You approach with caution, moving slow like you're trying not to trigger a tripwire. The pail clanks against your leg, which feels too loud, and your boots squelch in mud that may also be compost and might also be alive. Mabel watches you. You sit on the stool, and immediately it wobbles like it has stage fright. You reach forward, gently, as if you're proposing something delicate. You never make it. Mabel shifts her weight and swings her tail with the precision of a trained assassin. It hits you square across the face, wet, heavy, and full of intent. You taste hay, regret, and possibly yesterday's soup. The stable hand gives a low whistle, impressed. You try again. This time you reach with more commitment, only for Mabel to take one large, deliberate step. Sideways. Your stool topples. Your dignity goes with it. You land in the mud, arms flailing, pail rolling away like it wants no part of this disaster. Somewhere, a chicken laughs. From behind the fence, you hear a voice. She's not impressed, says a girl, maybe 12, with ink-stained fingers and a smirk that could crack glass. She's holding a small notebook and writing something down quickly. Not impressed with what? You ask, climbing to your feet and peeling straw off your sleeve. With you, she says. She knows. You blink at her. Knows what? The girl doesn't answer. She just taps her pen twice against the page and gives you a look like you've been filed under observations, worrying. You begin to wonder how many entries you've already earned. You return to the stool, cautiously, and try again. Mabel snorts. You think about strategy. There must be a way, some kind of rhythm. A cow milking technique lost to time and farmhand apprenticeships. You breathe slowly, focus, and make your move. For 3 glorious seconds, everything goes right. The pail is under her. Your hands do what you think hands are supposed to do. There's a sound, a liquid confirmation that maybe, just maybe, you're not completely terrible at this. And then she sits, not on the ground, on you. Your legs are pinned. The stool cracks. Your face is inches from a hoof that is not entirely clean. You don't scream because it would only encourage her. From the fence, the girl writes faster. Eventually, Mabel stands back up, having made her point. You crawl away, stiff and slightly altered as a person. The stable hand gives you a thumbs up. You don't know if it's sarcastic. As you limp back toward the barn, you glance over your shoulder. Mabel turns her head slowly. She looks at you, and then nods. Not a big nod, not dramatic, just a subtle dip, like she's acknowledging something final. You don't know what it means, but your spine shivers. Anyway, the girl closes her notebook. She's marked you now, she says. You'll see. You don't ask what that means. You just keep walking, trying not to make eye contact with any other livestock. The pail remains in the mud. You leave it there, out of respect. Market day is announced by a bell that sounds like it's made from a stolen pot and a sense of urgency. You're told to run the errands, which is shouted in your direction by no fewer than 3 different people, none of whom clarify what those errands are. Someone hands you a cloth pouch and points vaguely toward the path. You assume this is enough to go on. It isn't. The market is chaos. It lives in a clearing just off the road, wedged between 2 suspiciously leaning houses and a patch of grass that might be cursed or just particularly unlucky. Dozens of stalls press up against each other like they're in a very aggressive line, each one bursting with produce, tools, questionable pastries, and the occasional loud duck. There is shouting. So much shouting. Some of it is bartering. Some of it is just recreational. You pass a woman screaming about radishes and a man trying to sell rainwater memories in tiny corked vials. You make eye contact with a chicken on a leash. It does not blink. Your first mistake is approaching the goat. You don't know it's a goat at first. It's large, it's chewing a sack, and it has the aura of someone who's already gotten away with something. You point and say, "Nice dog," as a joke. The man holding the goat's rope doesn't laugh. The goat snorts, headbutts your thigh, and nearly steals your pouch. The insult is taken. The price will be ongoing. You limp onward. Your next task is to trade a carrot for a fish. The woman who gave you the carrot said this was a fair swap, which in hindsight feels less like an economic principle and more like a prank. You find the fish man, a leathery fellow with boots made of other boots, and present your carrot proudly. He looks at it like you've handed him a poem about taxes. Then he eats the carrot in one bite, slaps a fish onto the table, and starts yelling at someone behind you. You reach for the fish. A child grabs it first. You both stare at each other. The child hisses. You do not win. You turn, defeated, only to be hailed by a turnip merchant with suspiciously few turnips. His stall is mostly empty, save for a single wooden crate and what might be a taxidermy squirrel holding a spoon. He offers you 2 premium turnips in exchange for collateral. You ask what kind. He grins, points to your mouth. Teeth, he says, as if this is the part where the deal usually closes. You walk away, fast. Somehow, through no conscious action on your part, you end up with 3 eggs and a broom. You don't remember asking for either. The eggs are warm and a little damp. The broom smells like lavender and something more aggressive. You try to return it to a stall, but the vendor insists you already paid, winks, and vanishes into a crowd like a warlock. You're not entirely convinced the broom isn't cursed. You carry it anyway. On your way out, you're stopped by a man who asks if you'd like to purchase wishes. You ask what kind. He says, short ones. You ask how short. He says, mostly just mild coincidences. You decline. He tells you that was your first free one. By the time you stumble back into the village, the sun is lower, your pouch is lighter, and you've lost one sock for reasons that remain unclear. The eggs are intact, the broom is still following you somehow, and your thigh still tingles where the goat judged you. Someone takes the eggs without thanks. The broom is confiscated by the well committee. You are handed a beat as a reward. It is not a good beat. You sit on a step, sticky with sweat and goat memories, and watch a bird steal someone's hat. You understand, suddenly, that the market is not a place you go to trade. It is a place you go to be tested. It starts, like most disasters, with confidence. Not yours, but the confidence of someone else seeing you from across the village square and deciding, without hesitation, that you are someone important. You are not. You are trying to return a borrowed basket that may or may not have once contained ferrets. No one is quite clear on that, but you step into the square with the poise of a person who has not yet been kissed by fate or by strangers, and that is enough. There's music. Not good music, but enthusiastic music, made mostly of bells, flutes, and a drum that sounds like it was invented before percussion had rules. You think, oh, a celebration, which is adorable. Before you can turn around, a boy runs up and hurls what looks like a handful of leaves directly at your chest. They explode into a cloud of greenish dust and a smell that reminds you of overcooked spinach and seasonal allergies. Long may he walk, the boy shouts. You blink. Someone else claps. Then another. A woman in a cloak yells, "Make way," and people do. You are very suddenly alone in the center of a circle of faces. Most of them are smiling. Some are crying. One man bows so low his hat falls off. You try to speak. A hand takes yours. An old woman you've never seen before places something damp and fragrant on your head. It might be moss. She kisses your forehead with the ceremonial seriousness of someone crowning a monarch or putting a hex on a potato. The music swells. The drum gets faster. The flute has entered its jazz phase. You begin walking, mostly because standing still feels like a challenge to whatever divine misunderstanding you've just triggered. The crowd follows. They cheer. They chant something that may be your name, or possibly just a sound you made when you stubbed your toe yesterday. A child hands you a radish tied to a stick with a ribbon. It is slightly warm and deeply unsettling. You do not know what to do with it, so you hold it aloft like a blessing. They cheer louder. You pass the baker's stall. He bows and mutters something about the chosen crust. You nod solemnly, which seems to be the correct response. Someone tosses a small bag of what might be raisins at your feet. You don't step on them. That feels political. A goat joins the parade. You don't know whose goat it is or why it's wearing a flower crown, but it locks eyes with you and starts walking in sync, like it's been training for this moment. You try to edge away. The goat edges closer. The crowd loves this. You've led the procession through the main road, past the well, where the grandmothers watch with silent, knowing approval, and now you're nearing the edge of the fields. You pause, unsure what the end point is. A man appears, dressed in layers of fabric that suggest either high fashion or laundry day, and presents you with a scroll. You do not take the scroll. He reads from it anyway. It is in rhyme. It references the stars, the soil, and something called the turning of the churn. You are named the bearer of growth and he who walks in circles. You are then officially declared parade honoree emeritus. You say thank you. You're not sure who to say it to, so you say it to everyone. There is applause. You try to hand the radish to someone. No one takes it. You keep it. The music fades. The crowd disperses slowly. like a dream you're not sure you had. The goat vanishes, probably into mist. You sit on a rock and stare at the radish. You do not understand what just happened. You suspect no one does, but you feel oddly moved, respected even, celebrated for reasons that make absolutely no sense, but still feel strangely earned. You bite the radish. It's terrible, but you cry anyway, just a little. Feast night sneaks up on you like most things in this village do, without context, explanation, or escape. A bell rings 3 times. Someone yells, "To the pit," and suddenly, the entire population is heading in one direction with a speed usually reserved for fires and sails on salted fish. You're handed a chipped wooden bowl, a spoon that might be a bone, and a seat on a long bench beside a man whose beard seems to be having a separate conversation with his ale. The pit, it turns out, is not metaphorical. It's a wide fire-dug hole ringed with stones and blackened iron hooks. Something is roasting in the middle, something large. You ask what it is. The person next to you smiles with their entire face and says, "Meat." You ask, "What kind?" And they repeat, slower and louder, "Meat." Like that will help. It doesn't. A woman walks by with a platter of something gray and wobbling. You take a piece. It jiggles like it's offended. You eat it anyway. It tastes like onions, candle wax, and distant suffering. Someone cheers. You nod, trying not to cry. More food appears. Baskets of things you don't recognize and things you almost recognize but not quite enough to feel safe. You take a ladle of thick, dark stew. It smells oddly sweet. There's a chunk in it the size of a squirrel. You hope it's not a squirrel. You eat it anyway because peer pressure in medieval times wears a very convincing apron. The drink is called the Good Brew. No one explains what's in it, but it arrives in mugs that feel warm even before you touch them. It tastes like fermented apples, betrayal, and heat. 2 sips in, and your ears are hot. 3 sips, and you're agreeing with a man named Boric that fences are a form of tyranny. The music starts. No one told you there would be music. But suddenly a fiddle screams into existence and everyone stomps in what might be a dance or a coordinated seizure. You're pulled up by 2 strong hands and shoved into the middle. You attempt to mimic the movements. The crowd laughs. Not unkindly, but with the joy of people watching someone enthusiastically fail. You are now the town's new jester. This is said with affection and possibly prophecy. The feast stretches into what you assume is early morning. There are roasted things, fried things, something that might be a root or a toe. You eat everything, sometimes twice because it seems rude not to, and sometimes because someone says, "It's lucky," and you're beginning to believe luck here is a form of survival. Someone tries to teach you a drinking song. You think you've got it until the final verse, when everyone yells in unison and tosses their mugs backward. Yours hits someone's goat. The goat does not forgive. Eventually, the fire dims, and people start to drift home, walking with the gentle sway of the extremely full or the questionably conscious. You stumble to your cot with a belly full of things you cannot name, and a mouth that tastes like salt, meat, and ambition. That night, your dreams are strange. You're chased by turnips. A chicken offers you a crown. A pig opens a door and whispers, "Choose wisely." You wake up at dawn drenched in sweat, tangled in your blanket, and 60% convinced you're dying. Your stomach makes a noise you will never forget. You lie there for an hour, unsure whether you've been poisoned, blessed, or simply introduced to the concept of medieval legumes. Eventually, you crawl out of bed, still breathing. Somehow, you hear a voice outside shout, "Good feast, that one," and someone else belch in agreement. You nod, slowly, to no one. You have survived the meat. It starts with a flower, not a grand one, not a bouquet or a ribbon gesture, just a small pale sprig of something you can't name, tucked inside a crumple of moss and handed to you with absolutely no warning. One moment, you're stacking firewood wrong. The next, she's there silent, quick, and barefoot, shoving the thing into your hand like it's a note you're not supposed to read out loud. Then she disappears into a haystack, literally, like a fox made of blush and attitude. You stare at the moss bundle for a while, trying to determine if this is a warning, a gift, or maybe a spell. It smells faintly of lemon and secrets. You consider asking someone what to do, but the last time you did that, you ended up washing butter churns for 6 hours because it builds character. So you keep the flower. You tuck it into your shirt pocket like it means something and carry on, except now people look at you differently. The old baker squints and nods. The goat man tips his hat. A child throws petals at your feet and then runs away before you can ask why. You are, apparently, now involved. By midday, someone pats you on the back and says, "May your union be blessed by fertile geese," which is something you can't emotionally unpack before they're already gone. You haven't seen her again, just the memory of her, and the flower, and the silence that followed. You pass the haystack once or twice. It doesn't move. You suspect she might be inside, watching, or asleep, or nesting. You think about returning the gesture. You consider finding a flower of your own, but all the ones you spot look either aggressively thorned or medicinal, and the last thing you want to do is accidentally declare war or imply she needs healing. So you wait. You wear the flower like a badge, and the village reacts like you've announced your engagement via town crier. The gossip circle, still terrifying, makes a humming sound whenever you walk by. One of them gestures vaguely toward your pants and says, "He's bloomed," which is horrifying in every possible context. On the second day, you find a turnip on your cot. You assume this is part of it, a sign maybe, a ritual offering. You cradle the turnip gently and nod to yourself like a man who understands none of what's happening but is at least trying to respect the customs. When she finally emerges again, dusted with straw, eyes bright and unreadable, she doesn't say hello. She points to the flower, still tucked near your collar, slightly wilted but very committed. Then she smiles, just a little, then walks away. You're pretty sure that means you're married now. No one corrects you. In fact, a man with a whistle you've never seen before starts following you around, asking when the festivities will begin. You tell him there are no festivities. He winks and mutters, "That's what they all say." You think about the flower, and the hay, and her smile. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even really romantic, by any conventional standard, you know, but it was. Something real. And now every time you see her across the field, tossing grain at birds like she's daring them to challenge her, something in your chest rearranges itself. Not loudly, just enough to make you notice. You're not sure what comes next, but you still have the flower. Brel doesn't introduce himself so much as he appears, like a sudden change in weather. One moment you're carrying firewood you were explicitly told not to stack near the goose shed, and the next, there's a sharp pain in your upper arm and a voice behind you saying, "You flinch like a squirrel with secrets." You turn. He's short, broad-shouldered, and built like someone who's wrestled a wheelbarrow uphill for sport. His smile looks accidental, like it happened on the way to a smirk and got stuck. You clutch your bicep, more confused than offended. "That means I like you," he says, by way of follow-up. "If I didn't, I'd throw mud or teeth." You blink, unsure how many of those teeth would be his. He doesn't wait for a response, just points at a low stone wall and says, "Rats live under there. Grab a rock." That's your introduction to friendship. You spend the afternoon crouched in grass, throwing pebbles with varying degrees of accuracy at shadows that may or may not be rats. You never see one, but Brel insists they're there. You suspect this may be a metaphor or some kind of long-form joke, but he takes it very seriously. "Rats remember," he says at one point, squinting into the distance like a war veteran. Miss one, and it waits. Then one day, it gets your bread or your toes. You nod solemnly. It feels rude not to. Between tosses, he shares things. Not secrets exactly, but declarations. He hates soup. He can read, sort of, but only the rude words. His uncle once swallowed a whistle and hasn't slept properly since. You laugh at that, and he grins so wide you think his face might actually crack open into a second, even friendlier face. Then he tells you about the priest, Father Darnell, the cougher, as Brel calls him, a man who smells like damp wool and disappointment. Brel claims the priest once looked into his soul and sighed. You ask what he did to deserve that. Brel shrugs. Existed weird. You tell him about the time you tried to compliment a chicken and it pecked your sleeve off. He howls with laughter, slaps your back so hard you almost forget it's the same arm he punched earlier. Eventually, you both lie back in the grass, rock throwing forgotten, staring up at the sky like it might offer bonus content. The clouds drift. A beetle lands on your shirt and refuses to leave, possibly claiming squatter's rights. Brel hums something tuneless but steady. I don't think you're useless, he says, like it's a very complicated truth he's just discovered. You're not great either. But you're here. That counts. You don't respond right away. Not because you're unsure how to, but because the words land like something heavier than they should, in a good way. Later, he teaches you how to skip rocks across the well without alerting the old women who guard it like dragons in kerchiefs. You're bad at it. He laughs anyway. It echoes. When the sun finally starts sinking behind the trees, he stands up, dusts off his tunic, and nods at you with all the ceremony of a knight, dubbing a fellow warrior. Same time tomorrow, he says. Bring better rocks. You don't say yes. You just show up. The chapel smells like melted candles and fear. You think maybe attending evening prayers will help you blend in, or at the very least, give your legs a break from hauling barrels of things that definitely aren't supposed to slosh. You enter quietly, choosing a spot near the back, between a lopsided pew and a spider the size of mild concern. The congregation is sparse tonight, mostly the usual grannies, damp-looking men, and one boy who might be asleep with his eyes open. The choir hums from behind a curtain like they're still deciding what key to commit to. Father Darnell stands at the front, pale and blinking like he's been woken up just now or possibly hasn't stopped blinking since birth. He begins the service with the enthusiasm of a man giving a toast at a funeral for someone who owed him money. His voice wheezes through a passage that you're pretty sure includes the word cabbage at least twice. Then he coughs. For a long time. Long enough that the choir, thinking it's their cue, launches into a hymn about lost sheep and moral fences, which you suspect is both off-topic and autobiographical. You try to focus. Really. But the pew keeps squeaking under you like it's tattling, and someone nearby is aggressively chewing something you hope isn't beeswax. That's when you notice the scroll. It's tucked beneath the altar, half hidden by a curtain and some sort of sacred laundry pile. You're not trying to snoop, but it's right there, and you're not exactly known for your restraint. So during the next wheeze break, you slide forward, reach beneath the fabric, and gently unroll it. It's old, brittle, and written in a mix of Latin and something that looks like the result of someone sneezing on a recipe. But one phrase leaps out at you in almost unnerving clarity. Devices of future days, glass-lit, voice-bound, full of faces. You freeze. The scroll goes on, listing things that sound suspiciously like phones, microwaves, and somehow roller skates. You blink, heart thudding, mind racing through every sci-fi novel, time travel film, and questionable history podcast you've ever consumed. You've stumbled across a prophecy, or a warning, or a medieval prank with long-term commitment. You don't get time to decide which, because someone is watching you. You look up, slowly, like a guilty child with cookie crumbs and no defense. It's a woman. She's tall, cloaked, and wearing the kind of expression usually reserved for people who have seen things. Her eyes flick to the scroll, then back to you. Her lips twitch, not quite a smile. Not quite not. You try to explain. You stammer something about dusting. Your voice breaks, on sacred maintenance. She doesn't blink. Instead, she bows, deeply. The seer, she whispers. You shake your head. She nods harder. Someone else turns. A third person gasps. Father Darnell sneezes into his robes. The whisper spreads. By the time you back away, scroll hastily shoved beneath a candlestick, and your knees aching from what might have been reverence or panic. At least 6 people are staring at you with open awe. A child drops a dried bead at your feet like an offering. The choir switches mid-song into something slower, heavier, more prophetic sounding, like they've caught on to the vibe without fully understanding why. You leave quickly. The next morning, someone has scratched a symbol on your door. It looks like a wheel, or possibly a misshapen sun. A small basket waits on the step. Inside, a lump of clay, a feather, and a boiled egg with a face drawn on it. You are not ready for this. You never even got to finish the hymn. The summons isn't official. It's just a child muddy, suspiciously fast who appears out of nowhere, shoves a twig at your chest like it's a scroll of importance, and says, "They want you." Then he runs off before you can ask who they are or why your entire stomach has dropped into your shoes. You know before you arrive. The gossip circle has assembled. 7 grandmothers in an uneven crescent near the well. Shawls like battle flags, eyes like sharpened soup spoons. They don't look at you so much as through you, like they already know everything and are just here for the formality. One pats the stone beside her. You sit. You consider running. You remember what happened the last time someone ran. The goat chased them. For hours. The questioning begins. They don't call it a trial, but it is. Every question is both vague and deadly. One asks, "What do you believe is the proper use of a turnip?" Another wants to know your intentions with the weather. You answer with the confidence of a squirrel bluffing its way through tax fraud. Every response seems to make things worse. You're too quick with a joke, too slow with your history of root vegetables. You say you like goats. This is a mistake. They remember the goat. "Is this about the parade?" you ask, weakly. One of them gasps, like you've confessed to eating a saint. They confer in whispers. A bee lands on your leg and refuses to leave. Someone brings out a folded cloth and unwraps it slowly, revealing a single, unblinking turnip. You don't know if this is evidence or a snack. No one clarifies. Then comes the verdict. "You shall assist old Marnie with the outhouse," says the eldest, whose voice could curdle cheese. The others nod, solemn and slow. One makes the sign of the bucket. Another gives you a look that might be sympathy or indigestion. You rise with what dignity you can gather, which is none. Old Marnie is already waiting by the pit. She's smaller than you expected, with arms like braided rope and a smell that defies science. She hands you a stick with a rag tied to the end and says, "Don't touch the walls." You're about to ask why, but then you see them. The walls. You understand. There's no real technique, just endurance, scraping, scooping, and making peace with every poor decision that led you here. Marnie hums while she works. You cry once, quietly, when your sleeve brushes something that shouldn't be warm. By midday, you are a different person, hollowed out, a husk of your former self. Marnie offers you a chunk of cheese from her pocket. You take it, because shame has no place here anymore. You chew it slowly, while staring into the horizon, hoping the wind will carry away the memory. Later, you're allowed to rinse off with a ladle and a sigh. You sit by yourself behind the grain shed, damp and defeated, wondering if this is the low point or just a scenic stop on the way down. Then you hear someone approaching. It's Brell, grinning like the idiot friend you didn't know you needed. He tosses you a stale biscuit and sits beside you. He doesn't ask questions, just leans back and starts naming clouds that don't exist. "Look," he says, pointing. "That one looks like a goat. Angry, judgmental, familiar." You groan. He laughs. You laugh too. Eventually. A little, then more. It doesn't fix anything, but it helps. The biscuit tastes like dust and defiance, and somehow, that's enough. It starts with bells. Not cheerful, musical bells, but the kind that sound like someone dropped a pot on a goat and then decided it was festive. You wake up to chaos streamers made of questionable fabric, barrels being rolled uphill for unknown reasons, and Thimble wearing a hat shaped like a duck. "It's game day," he announces, as if this explains anything. You don't have time to object. You're handed a sash, a raw onion, and pushed into the center of the square before you've had breakfast or remembered how to lie convincingly about back pain. The first event is Catch the Pig. The rules are unclear, so is the prize. What's very clear is that the pig has no interest in being caught, and possibly trained in parkour. It dodges grown men, weaves through toddlers, and once somehow scales a low fence. You aren't fast, but you are desperate and surprisingly bendy under pressure. You don't catch the pig so much as accidentally land on it mid-lunge, sliding across the mud like a confused seal with tax problems. The crowd cheers. Someone throws cabbage. You're declared the winner, mostly because the pig refuses to be touched again and has hidden itself inside someone's laundry. Then comes throw the turnip. You've never thrown a turnip before. You've held one, briefly, before being scolded for doing it wrong. But now, you are handed the largest, lumpiest root vegetable you've ever seen and directed toward a target that appears to be a barrel wearing a crown. The villagers chant something that might be your name or might be a warning. You aim, you throw. The turnip sails majestically for half a second before veering left, like it just remembered something urgent and slamming directly into the mayor's table. There is a brief silence followed by the sound of pickled fish hitting the ground. A dog begins to bark. You are not the winner of Throw the Turnip, but it's fine. You're alive, mostly unjudged, and then Thimble offers you a celebratory cup of something purple. It tastes like sadness and berries. You drink it anyway. This is your first mistake. Your second mistake is dancing. There's a circle, music, and some kind of hopping pattern that everyone seems to know instinctively, like they were born mid-jig. You try to join in. Your legs disagree. You trip over someone's foot or maybe your own, and end up face first in a flower arrangement that smells like soap and anxiety. The children laugh. An old man declares it, most spirited. You are given a ribbon, and then comes the well. You weren't planning on falling into the well. No one plans for that. You were just backing away from a game called Catch the Ferret, which should be illegal when someone bumps into you. Hard. There's a wobble, a flail, and suddenly, gravity becomes your most committed dance partner. You go down like a sack of onions and emerge soaked, sputtering, and clinging to a rope that smells like mildew and mild judgment. It's not deep, but it's enough. The crowd loses its collective mind. You are a hero, or a cautionary tale, possibly both. Children toss you bread crusts in admiration. Someone starts calling you well-born. You don't correct them. You're cold, humiliated, and slightly honored. Also, still holding the sash and the purple drink. By nightfall, there's a bonfire, and you're given a seat of honor that's mostly just a dry log. Brell sits next to you, chewing something unidentifiable. You did good, he says, bumping your shoulder. Didn't even cry that long. You nod, wiping soot from your nose. It's not the day you wanted, but it's one they'll remember. You're not sure what it is at first. The mug is wooden, warm, and a little sticky. You hold it up to the light like that'll help, but the liquid inside is the color of bad decisions and smells like bread that's gotten ideas above its station. Brel hands it to you with the kind of grin that says he's seen this story before and wants to watch the sequel. "It's beer," he says. Like that explains everything. You've never had medieval beer before. You assume it's like regular beer, except probably chunkier. You take a cautious sip. It tastes like something that used to be barley, gave up, and went into improv. You take a bigger sip, because your standards have dropped dramatically over the past few weeks, and also because someone dares you. You don't remember who. Possibly the goat. Things escalate quickly. One mug becomes two. Two becomes someone singing. That someone is you. The song starts out as a lullaby and ends with you passionately inventing verses about bread, firewood, and the tragic beauty of a turnip left out in the rain. People clap. You are confused and proud and deeply committed to the emotional journey of the song, even when your voice cracks like a haunted chair. Then you dance, or attempt to. Your legs betray you almost immediately, twisting into a pattern that suggests a fight between a frog and a broom. You spin, you fall. You get back up, because the beer tells you that gravity is a suggestion, and rhythm is a feeling in the soul, not the feet. You reach for someone's hand and miss. You apologize to a barrel. Someone hands you a pie and you try to wear it as a hat. You are a menace. At some point, you cry. It's not clear why. It might be the song. It might be the memory of the bath barrel. It might be the overwhelming beauty of a sunset you can't see. Brel tries to pat your shoulder, but you miss and end up hugging his knees. He accepts this with the patience of someone who's seen a turnip festival go sideways. You black out somewhere between a passionate speech about communal hay and an attempt to do push-ups with a chicken on your back. You wake up in a sheep cart. The cart is moving. The sheep are unimpressed. Your head is pounding like it's trying to forge its own horseshoe, and your mouth tastes like someone stored onions in it for winter. You sit up slowly and immediately wish you hadn't. A sheep sneezes on your arm. You try to remember what day it is. You try to remember your name. You fail at both. Eventually, the cart stops. You're near the village again, but no one looks you in the eye. A small girl sees you and screams, "Shame," before sprinting away. You limp back toward the main square and find Brel leaning against the well, grinning. "You lived," he says, like he's genuinely surprised. You nod, ashamed and also deeply curious. "What did I say?" He shrugs. "You told the blacksmith's wife she had elven calves and proposed a duel to prove your honor. Then you kissed her apron. You blink." He adds, "You're not allowed to dance anymore. That was decided while you were singing to a broom." The day passes with quiet stares, awkward silences, and the lingering question of how long your ban on dancing will last, possibly forever, possibly longer. That night, someone slides a mug toward you again. You stare at it for a long time, then push it away like a seasoned war hero refusing to return to the battlefield. The sheep probably still talk about you. You're handed a basket and a warning. The basket is old, mostly holes, and smells like onions and despair. The warning is vague. "Mind the woods." You ask what you're looking for, and the answer is herbs. But the way they say it makes you feel like that's code for something else. Or maybe they just expect you to wander off and become someone else's problem. Either way, the forest looms ahead like it knows your search history and is not impressed. The trees are taller than seems reasonable. You step inside, and the air shifts immediately, thicker and cooler, like it's sizing you up. Every twig you snap feels personal. Every bird call feels judgmental. At one point you trip over nothing and apologize to a fern. It doesn't forgive you. You don't know what herbs look like. You assume green is a safe bet. You grab a handful of leafy things and shove them in the basket. Then a different leafy thing that might be poison or salad. The squirrel that watches you from a branch looks deeply concerned. The deeper you go, the more the forest stops pretending to be friendly. The light changes. The trees start whispering, or maybe that's just your imagination, which at this point is spiraling fast. Then you hear it. A noise, not a scary one, more like a but from someone who's just licked a rock and is considering doing it again. You turn slowly. There's a man, probably. He's wearing a cloak made of twigs, moss, and something that smells like badgers. His beard is more bird's nest than facial hair. His eyes sparkle like he knows something you don't, and also knows you'll never understand it anyway. He looks at you, tilts his head, and hoots, like an owl. You wait for clarification. There is none. He points at your basket, then at your feet, then at the sky. He makes a gesture that might mean, stop, go, or congratulations, you are now a turnip. You nod politely. This is apparently the correct response. He grunts, turns around, and walks directly into a tree. Not around it, into it. Disappears like a secret or a tax document. You stand there for a while, considering your life choices and also the faint pain in your ankle from falling into the well 3 days ago. Then something bites you. A squirrel. You do not scream. You exclaim, loudly. The squirrel does not care. It runs off with what might have been your dignity. You check the basket. You now have moss and 2 crushed leaves, and a pine cone that definitely wasn't invited. Eventually, you make your way back. The edge of the forest feels like returning to a reality where people wear shoes and don't communicate exclusively in animal noises. Brel sees you and waves. You survived, he says, looking slightly disappointed. You hand him the basket. He stares into it. What is this? You shrug. Wisdom. He nods like that makes sense. It doesn't. But no one asks further questions. That evening, the village healer takes the moss and declares it useful for foot rot. You accept the compliment like a trophy. You sleep harder that night. Something about the woods shakes you in a way you can't explain. Not fear, exactly, but something close, like you were briefly a background character in someone else's story, and now you're not sure if you ever want a leading role again. Still, the squirrel bite swells with pride. You wear it like a badge. The evening smells like bread, smoke, and something softly hopeful. It's festival adjacent, again. But this one is quieter, more candles than torches, more humming than shouting. You're still banned from dancing, but no one seems to be enforcing it tonight. You've learned to hover near the edge of things, where spilled cider and questionable games can't reach you. And then you see them. Not for the first time, but maybe for the first time you see them. They've always been there in the background, near the haystack, occasionally throwing rocks with a sort of poetic accuracy. Tonight, they're wearing something that might be considered fancy here, a slightly less stained tunic and a flower behind one ear that looks entirely intentional. You're halfway through your 3rd roasted turnip when they appear beside you, say hi, and then stand there like they're waiting for the next line in a play you didn't rehearse for. So naturally, you panic and offer them your half-eaten turnip. They take it. This is the beginning of something you don't have a name for. You walk them home, which in this case is a 15-minute stroll through mud, chickens, and at least one argumentative goose. The stars are out, clear and numerous, scattered like some god got bored and just tossed a handful across the sky. You don't know their constellations. You don't need to. The silence is easy, which feels dangerous. You try to say something clever, not too clever, just enough to make them smile again, the way they did back at the fire. You land somewhere between a compliment and an accidental confession involving bees. They laugh. It's not at you, or maybe it is, but it's warm, soft. You don't mind being the punchline if it means this sound keeps happening. You almost hold their hand. Almost. But then the ditch happens. It's a subtle ditch, a sneaky one, not wide, but deep enough to suddenly make gravity very personal. One moment you're walking, cool and collected, considering maybe offering to show them the place where the angry rooster lives. The next, you're upside down, leg deep in mystery mud and staring at a suspicious rock that looks like it's mocking you. There is a pause, and then the laughing starts again, but they help you up. Not quickly, because apparently ditches cling, but they do. Hands muddy, hair slightly glowing from the lantern they carry. They brush a leaf from your shoulder and pretend not to notice the part where you said, "I'm fine," in a voice only dogs could hear. You walk the last few steps slower. At the door, they turn and say your name. Your village name, not the one you came with. It sounds different when they say it, like it belongs. They thank you for the walk, the turnip, the ditch dive. You say any time, like that's something people say here and not what you blurt when your brain short circuits. They go inside. You stand there for a moment, unsure what to do with your face. The stars are still out. The goose is watching you from the shadows like it knows your emotional state and is judging it. You walk back alone, heart thumping in an entirely unmedieval rhythm. At some point, you realize you're smiling. You don't know what this is. You don't know if it will last, or if tomorrow you'll be asked to shovel pig things until the memory is buried beneath calluses and sore knees. But for tonight, you are something else, someone else, and you like that person. The letter arrives by goat. Not with a goat, not on a goat, by goat. As in, the goat walks up to you, stares directly into your soul, and drops a crumpled parchment at your feet like it just emerged from finishing school. The goat then eats part of your tunic and trots away without explanation. You stand there holding the letter, which smells faintly of rosemary and power. You're summoned to the manor, the big building on the hill you've only seen from a distance, usually while squinting and wondering how one family gets that much roof space. It's the kind of place that has gates for no reason and probably owns 4 chairs. Thimble sees the seal and gasps. "That's Lord Merrick's crest," he says, as if you're supposed to know what that means. He whispers something about tax records and curses. You try to ask why you were summoned, but Thimble is already making the sign of the garlic and backing away. So you walk up the winding hill, through fields that smell aggressively of cow and ambition, until you reach the manor gates. A boy with a bowl cut and an attitude lets you in after poking you with a stick. It feels ceremonial. You're escorted through 3 too many hallways, past a tapestry of someone jousting what looks suspiciously like a cabbage, and finally deposited in a room full of scrolls, dust, and judgment. Lord Merrick is there, reclining on a chair that definitely doesn't need to be that big. "You're the one," he says. You nod because it feels right. You're not sure what you're agreeing to, but you're here, and there's a goat involved, so why not? He gestures to a long table piled with parchment, quills, and a single potato. "Write something for me," he says, in Latin. You freeze. Latin, as it turns out, is not your best language, or any language you know at all. You consider honesty. You consider running. Then you consider that you haven't had breakfast and this place probably has butter. So you smile, pick up a quill, and write lorem ipsum somethingus in your neatest fake script. The scribe next to you watches in horror. He leans in, sniffs the ink, and mutters, "This isn't even proper gibberish." You panic and draw a horse. It's not a good horse. It looks like a duck gave up halfway through becoming a dragon. You label it Noble Steed and add some swirls for emphasis. Lord Merrick stares at it for a long time. Then he claps. "Modern," he says, unburdened by form. "I like it." You nod solemnly like this was intentional. The scribe dies a little inside. You're handed a sack of something lumpy and told to return in a week to commence the chronicles. You don't know what that means, but it sounds like an unpaid internship. The sack, as it turns out, is full of onions. Some fresh, some bold enough to have their own opinions. You carry it home like a trophy. That night, Thimble demands the whole story. You exaggerate the horse part. Brell listens with one eyebrow raised and calls you the Onion Knight. It sticks. You sit by the fire, the bag of onions beside you, the smell already beginning to conquer the room. You didn't mean to become a court artist, or a calligrapher, or a liar with a vegetable salary, but somehow this feels like progress. You stare at your hands, still stained with ink and minor deception. You're someone now. Not important, exactly, but noticed. And in this strange cabbage-scented life, that might be enough. The barn door wasn't technically your fault. It had been leaning for weeks, creaking ominously with the kind of warning usually reserved for earthquakes and vengeful spirits. You simply leaned on it, lightly, thoughtfully. Maybe while holding a pail of something you now realize was not water but pig broth, a substance no one explained, and you're too afraid to bring up again. The point is, the hinge gave up. The entire structure, insulted by your existence, detached from its frame and fell. Not in a slow, tragic kind of way, but in a full, cartoon collapse that included a surprised goose, a cloud of hay, and a scream that might have been yours, or the wind, or the barn itself, swearing eternal vengeance. You stand there, half covered in splinters and what may be a rat, as silence descends, except for the goose. The goose is furious. A child runs by, shouting, "The stable's been breached," like you've committed treason. By the time you limp back to the main path, everyone knows. You are, for the second time this week, the headline of the village. The baker's boy gives you a pat, thumbs down. A grandmother slowly turns her chair away from you without breaking eye contact. Even the cow won't meet your gaze. Old man Crivens emerges from somewhere damp and judgmental. "That door was made from the last tree touched by St. Elric," he declares, though it very much looked like driftwood and nails. "You've cursed the hinges of our hearts." This sounds poetic but very unhelpful. You try to explain that the structure was unsound, that the goose had a knife. You're still not sure. That you weren't even supposed to be near the barn and were only trying to find the bucket someone told you was haunted. It all sounds worse out loud. The village gathers. They do not look amused. Brell slowly inches behind a cart to avoid being associated. A tribunal of grandmothers forms without warning. They appear out of nowhere, as if conjured by the scent of failure and gossip. Their shawls bristle in the breeze like battle flags. One carries a ledger, another, a spoon large enough to be considered a blunt weapon. Questions begin. Why were you near the barn? What did you do to the door? Have you always had the face of someone guilty? You answer them all badly. You use the phrase structural destiny at one point and immediately wish to be buried under your own shame. They do not sentence you to death. They sentence you to something worse, outhouse duty. Specifically, the outhouse. After festival week, when everyone's digestive systems have waged civil war, you are handed a rake. You ask why. No one answers. You're told to wear gloves. You are not given gloves. Someone pats your back and whispers, "Be strong," like you're going to war. The stench has layers, philosophical ones. You learn things about yourself, about thresholds, about failure. You consider your life decisions. You consider faking your own death and starting over as a traveling tooth merchant. But then, something strange happens. Thimble appears with a wheelbarrow full of wildflowers and no clear plan. He says it's to help the air. Brell follows, reluctantly, with a stolen bottle of herbal oil and a look that says, "I'll deny this later." Even the girl from the haystack, she of the moss-wrapped flower and mysterious silences, passes by and hands you a clothespin for your nose. She doesn't speak, just nods, then leaves before anyone can witness her kindness. You stand there, rake in hand, surrounded by the faintest hint of lavender and human decency. You are still covered in shame. You are still definitely banned from barns. But maybe, just maybe, you are not alone. The chicken is back. It appears without ceremony, without sound, without mercy. One moment you are enjoying a moment of what passes for peace in a village where bread is weaponized and bathwater is sacred. The next, there is a weight upon your head. Not metaphorical, feathery, warm, loosely vibrating with menace. It claws gently at your scalp, as if kneading dough made of your thoughts. You freeze. You know this weight. There's a pause in the square, a stillness that feels ancient. Then someone gasps like they've just witnessed a miracle or a crime. Probably both. "It's the chicken," says a child, awed. Not a chicken. The chicken. The one that drew your blood in your first week here. The one that challenged you to a duel by pecking your shin until your soul wavered. The one that stared deep into your eyes with the knowledge of 100 nightly deaths and a firm understanding of poultry tax law. That chicken. The village assumed it had vanished into legend or stew, but now it has returned, and it has chosen you. Thimble faints. Brel makes the sign of something religious and probably misspelled. The priest stumbles into the scene, robes askew, eyes wild. He squints at your head like it might sprout antlers. "A sign," he declares, "the chosen roost." You try to speak, but the chicken tightens its talons like it has editorial input. You remain still. You remain very, very still. Grandmother Ilska appears from nowhere and hands you a loaf of bread with a bow carved into it. "For the keeper," she says solemnly. You are handed 3 more loaves and a ladle before you can respond. A small girl places a crown of wilted daisies around the chicken's neck. You don't even get one. A chant starts. You do not start it. It is unclear who does, but it spreads fast. "Fowl keeper, fowl keeper, fowl keeper." You try to wave them off, to protest, to ask the extremely reasonable question of what is happening, but the chicken shifts its weight, and you take that as a threat. You nod slowly instead, which apparently seals the deal. You are hoisted onto someone's shoulders, possibly the blacksmith, or a very tall log. You are paraded around the square. The chicken flaps a single wing. The crowd erupts like this is prophecy fulfilled. Later, you sit by the well in what has now become your official chicken perch. You have a sash. It reads, "Feathered Fate." You were not consulted. The chicken has not left your head. It has claimed you like a poorly constructed throne, and now gazes over the village with quiet judgment. Occasionally it makes a low, clucking sound that sends shivers through the elders. You suspect it's fluent in ancient curses. Thimble approaches with a scroll. "This lists your responsibilities," he says, breathless, reverent. Some are ceremonial, some are bird. You scan the parchment. There are words like dawn crow, summoning, egg reckoning, and something called the annual fluffening. You look up. "I don't know what any of this means," you whisper. "No one does," Thimble replies, "but the chicken does." Night falls. The chicken does not leave. It simply tucks its head beneath a wing and settles in. You sit very still. You don't sleep. You don't blink. You just exist beneath your new feathered overlord and wonder if this is what destiny feels like. Warm, slightly itchy, smelling faintly of corn. It's tucked beneath a loose stone in the chapel wall, just sitting there, like it's always been waiting. You notice it because you're trying to avoid sweeping the entryway, which, according to the priest, is part of your sacred duty now that the chicken has deemed you worthy. You're not entirely sure what chicken-based divinity has to do with medieval janitorial work, but you've long since stopped questioning village logic. The broom is too short. The dust is too enthusiastic. You lean against the wall in defeat, and something clicks. Literally. You press on the stone. It gives. Behind it is a small wooden box, barely bigger than your hand. You open it, expecting nothing. Or maybe a rat. Possibly a very old cheese. Instead, there's a key. It's old, iron, and shaped like it's been forged for a door that doesn't exist yet. You hold it in your palm and feel something shift, not in the air, Not even in the room, but in you. The key hums slightly. You blink, and the chapel is both there and not. The world ripples at the edges. For a moment, you remember the sound of car horns. You smell shampoo. Someone calls your name, your real name. You close the box and open it again. Same key. This time, you pull it out. Behind the altar, there's a crack. You've never seen it before, but now it's obvious. A split in the stone, like a paper tear in the corner of a page, just wide enough to fit a key. You hold it up, and the crack glows faintly, blue and modern, like screen light. Your breath catches. This could be it. A way back. Home. Shoes with soles. Pizza. Sleep that doesn't involve rodents auditioning for Broadway in your rafters. People who know your name and pronounce it correctly. Showers that don't require apologies to a well spirit. A world without chickens, making life decisions for you. You glance back. The chapel is quiet. Outside, the bell rings for lunch. You hear Brel shout, something about plum pie. There's laughter. Thimble's terrible flute warbles through the air. A girl giggles. Maybe it's the one who handed you that moss-wrapped flower weeks ago. Maybe it's the one who threw a radish at you during the turnip games. You're still not sure if that was flirting or a duel. You look at the key again. You could just go. No more cow-related incidents. No more being mistaken for a lord, a thief, or a goat wrangler within the span of 20 minutes. You could leave behind the endless confusion, the suspicious bread, the emotional damage caused by a particularly judgmental duck. But then, you think of the loaf Ilska wrapped for you last night, left by your door with a note that simply said, extra crusty, like your face. You think of the time Brel gave you the slightly less moldy blanket during storm week, the time someone carved a little chicken on your door as a kind of tribute or prank. You think of the sky last night, smeared with stars so bright it made you forget electricity ever existed. You look down. The key is still in your hand. It's heavy, important. You slide it back into the box. You replace the stone. Outside, someone yells your current name, the bad one, the one that started as an insult, but somehow became yours. You step out into the sun and squint at the world that's adopted you. The bread is probably overcooked. The sky smells like goats. There's a chicken waiting for you on the fence post, eyes narrowed like it knows everything. And someone just saved you, the last plum. The fence is mostly sticks and spite, sagging like it's had a long day for the past 30 years. You're not even sure it counts as a fence anymore, more like a decorative suggestion. But when the corner post gives out with a slow groan and takes 3 chickens and a bucket of questionable potatoes with it, you're the one who gets handed a hammer made entirely of iron, splinters, and inherited disappointment. You fix it, kind of, with help. A little from Brel, who shows up chewing on something that might be bark and says it's traditional. A little from Thimble, who claims the original fence was built to keep out sky wolves and therefore requires at least 1 bone per yard. Mostly you just tie things together until they stop falling over. It leans to the left and smells like wet regret, but it stands. And that's when the cow nods. You see her watching. Same cow from weeks ago, the one who headbutted your pride straight into the hay. She gives you a long, deliberate blink and dips her head once. You blink back. There is no sarcasm in her eyes this time, only approval, possibly indigestion, but also approval. You've been judged again. This time, you passed. No one's told you what to do today. No shouted orders, no mysterious tasks involving buckets and crying. Just quiet work and the occasional plum tossed your way from someone passing by. You don't drop them anymore. You even catch one, mid-air, like a wizard. You overhear them talking about you. By the well, where the grandmothers gather with their knitting and their knowledge and their ominous murmurs, you hear fragments. He's the one who survived the turnip fling. Didn't cry at the outhouse trial. rebuilt the gate with his bare hands and possibly teeth. You're a myth now, a legend in itchy socks. They debate your origin. One insists you were born under a cursed star. Another swears you arrived in a glowing sack of onions, weeping and glowing. Someone says you were sent by the cabbage spirits to bring balance to the livestock. Someone else says no, you're just from East Darren. You are none of these things, and a little bit of all of them, because no one asks where you're really from anymore. They just ask if you're staying for stew. You help carry water from the well without spilling. You untangle a goat from a basket. You say I and reckon in places that feel right. You almost believe you've always known how to mend a fence, patch a roof, dodge an angry duck. Almost. Ilska brings you a scarf, says it's not a gift, just something she didn't want to look at anymore. It's lumpy and warm and smells like cinnamon and hay. You wear it for hours before realizing it's shaped like a turnip. She did that on purpose, probably. The priest nods at you during evening prayers. The choir doesn't sing about sheep this time, which you think might be a compliment. Thimble carves a stick into what he says is your likeness. It looks like a rat with a cape, but the gesture is touching. That night, you sit by the fire. Someone passes you a bowl. Someone else leans their head on your shoulder and doesn't ask anything of you. The wind rustles the roof, but doesn't get in. You've stopped waiting for the sky to tear open. The key is still in the chapel wall. You haven't touched it. No one mentions it, but you think they know. You eat stew. You laugh at something stupid, Brel says. You wrap the scarf tighter and scratch the chicken that's decided your lap is a valid place to sleep. No one says it out loud, but you know. You belong here now. The light wakes you before the rooster does. A golden wash through the crooked shutter, soft and slow like it knows you now. Your joints ache, but only a little, like they're whispering instead of shouting. You sit up. The blanket falls into your lap in the shape of a chicken. Possibly intentional, possibly prophetic. You no longer question it. You breathe in. The air smells like ash from the baker's hearth, honey from someone's breakfast, and something faintly earthy and wild that might be goat, but might also be spring. Outside, someone is yelling about cabbages. This is normal. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed, and for once, you don't brace yourself. Your feet find the floorboards like they belong there, like they always have. Your name, your village name, not the one from before is called through the window. It's the small boy with the missing tooth and the alarming fondness for spiders. He's grinning. He's holding your boot. Just one. You don't ask why. You thank him and put it on. Today, you will be needed. Not dramatically. There will be no parade. There will be no collapse of ancient wells or declaration of foul-based titles. Just a fence to check, a bundle of carrots to carry, maybe a walk to the edge of the woods to see if the hermit squirrel is still mad at you. Probably. You step outside. The sun blinks behind a cloud. Sheep trudge toward the river, and Thimble waves at you from a pile of sticks that might be art or might be a trap. You wave back. Ilska is there too. She doesn't wave, just nods and raises an eyebrow like she's daring you to mess up breakfast again. You don't. You've learned. Mostly. You slice bread without summoning the smoke gods. You ladle stew without soaking your boots. And when you hand Brel a plum, he calls you a right little hero and shoves you into a haystack by way of affection. You accept it. Later, someone hands you a bucket and says, "You know what to do." You do. You really do. You walk the path down past the chapel, which no longer creaks ominously when you enter. The priest even smiles at you now, though he might just be relieved you're not still the seer. You left that scroll exactly where you found it. The chicken guards it now. You fill the bucket. You walk back. And on the way, you pause. Not because you're confused, not because you're afraid, just because. There's a quiet spot near the broken tree stump where the sky always seems to stretch a little farther. You stand there a while. You think about onions and turnips and how many different ways someone can fall into a well. You think about the key in the chapel wall and how easy it would be to leave. You don't want to. There's a breeze. It smells like rain and dust and maybe a little like future. The good kind. The kind with stew in it. When you return to the square, someone presses a plum into your hand. You look up and they're already walking away, but they glance back just once. You smile like an idiot. You're not special here. Not anymore. But you're known. You belong. You take the plum and the bucket and whatever's next.